happens when a global sportswear giant decides to obliterate every rule in professional tennis? What happens when a 19-year-old girl from Manila becomes the weapon in a corporate war that nobody saw coming? The answer is absolute chaos, and the shockwaves are still tearing through the WTA Tour like a Category 5 hurricane that refuses to die down. This is the story of how Nike's unprecedented invitation to Eala didn't just stun the entire women's tennis establishment. It detonated a brands war so explosive, so ruthless, and so controversial that it forced every player, agent, executive, and fan to pick a side in a battle that had nothing to do with backhands and everything to do with betrayal, loyalty, money, and survival. Nobody predicted this nightmare. Absolutely nobody. Eala wasn't supposed to matter yet. At least that's what the tennis establishment smugly believed, as they sipped champagne in their luxury boxes and ignored emails from her agent. Born in Manila and raised on clay courts that literally cracked under the brutal Philippine sun, Eala carried a dream so massive, so audacious, that it seemed laughable given her home country's struggling tennis infrastructure. While other prodigies trained at million-dollar academies with state-of-the-art facilities and personal nutritionists, Eala clawed her way through junior circuits with second-hand equipment, borrowed rackets, and a hunger so relentless it terrified her opponents. Then everything shifted in ways that made the tennis world's gatekeepers choke on their assumptions. The 2022 US Open Junior title wasn't just another trophy for the cabinet, it was a declaration of war. Eala dismantled her opponents with surgical precision that left veteran commentators scrambling for superlatives dramatic enough to capture what they were witnessing. Her forehand became a weapon so devastating that coaches at the Rafael Nadal Academy whispered her name in reverent, almost religious tones. Suddenly, sponsors who had deleted her emails without reading them were flooding her agent's inbox with increasingly desperate offers. But here's what made Eala genuinely dangerous to the established order. She didn't just win matches, she captivated hearts and minds. Her post-match interviews revealed a fierce intelligence that transcended the typical athlete platitudes everyone had grown numb to. She spoke eloquently about representing Southeast Asia, about carrying the hopes of millions who had never seen someone who looked like them succeed at this level of international competition. Filipino fans didn't just support Eala, they worshipped her with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. Social media platforms erupted into celebrations every single time she stepped onto a court. By early 2024, Eala had cracked the WTA Top 200. Modest by superstar standards, perhaps, but absolutely seismic for a nation that had produced exactly 0 Grand Slam contenders in the entire Open era. Every tournament she entered became appointment viewing in Manila. Sports bars packed with screaming fans at 3 o'clock in the morning just to watch her play qualifiers. Politicians cynically name-dropped her in speeches to score easy popularity points. She had transcended the category of athlete and become something far more powerful and dangerous. She was a movement, and movements always attract predators. The sponsorship landscape in women's tennis operates like a ruthless ecosystem where only the strongest survive, and sentimentality is a luxury nobody can afford. Brands don't invest in potential or promises, they invest in certainty, in guaranteed returns, in names that move merchandise and fill stadiums. Serena Williams, Naomi Osaka, Iga Swiatek. These names were walking ATM machines that dominated headlines and sold everything from shoes to luxury watches. But Eala represented something infinitely rarer and more valuable, an entire nation's completely untapped market. The Philippines, with its population of 115 million people and absolutely rabid sports fandom, suddenly had a tennis heroine. Whoever signed her wouldn't just gain an athlete, they would gain an entire country's loyalty and purchasing power. Her existing sponsors understood this terrifying reality. They had locked her into contracts when she was just a hopeful junior with big dreams, paying modest fees for what they naively assumed would be modest returns. It was standard practice, safe bets that protected their downside. Nobody anticipated she would become this invaluable this quickly, transforming from a promising prospect into a marketing goldmine practically overnight. But someone else was watching with predatory focus. Deep inside Nike's global scouting division, where analysts track emerging athletes with the intensity of CIA operatives, the call came on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday afternoon in March. Eala's agent, a seasoned Manila-based representative who had navigated the treacherous waters of Philippine sports politics for 2 decades, answered an unrecognized international number, expecting perhaps another lukewarm inquiry. What followed was a 47-minute conversation that would rupture the tennis world completely. Nike wasn't interested in a standard endorsement deal with performance bonuses and photo shoots. They wanted totality: full apparel rights, footwear exclusivity, equipment collaboration, and a 10-year partnership with guaranteed minimums that absolutely dwarfed anything Eala currently earned. The numbers were obscene in a way that made her agent's hands shake as he scribbled them down. We're talking 8 figures not spread over a decade, but guaranteed up front. Performance bonuses that would trigger automatically with every ranking milestone, every tournament victory, every Grand Slam appearance. Nike promised Eala a signature shoe line with her name emblazoned on products sold globally, prime advertising slots during major tournaments that reached hundreds of millions of viewers, and integration into marketing campaigns alongside icons like Serena Williams and Rafael Nadal. They weren't offering a contract. They were offering immortality, a chance to transcend sport entirely and become a global brand that would outlive her playing career by decades. But here's where the situation gets absolutely twisted and reveals Nike's true ruthlessness. Eala was already sponsored. A regional sportswear brand had signed her 3 years earlier when she was just a promising junior with potential but no proven results. The deal paid reasonably by local standards, provided quality gear, and covered some travel expenses. Nothing glamorous or life-changing, but functional enough to keep her competing. That contract didn't expire until late 2025, more than 18 months away. Breaking it would require brutal legal warfare, massive penalty payments, and the kind of public acrimony that destroys reputations. Nike didn't care about any of that. Their legal team had dissected her existing contract with the precision of surgeons, identifying exit clauses, negotiation windows, and obscure loopholes that could be weaponized. More disturbingly, they had calculated exactly what it would cost to obliterate that partnership completely, and decided the price was utterly irrelevant compared to the value of acquiring Eala. The offer included something unprecedented in tennis sponsorship history. Nike would personally cover all legal fees, all penalty payments, and all settlement costs associated with terminating her current sponsorship. Eala wouldn't pay a single dollar out of pocket. She would simply walk away from her old brand, sign with Nike, and watch her career trajectory transform overnight from promising player to global superstar. It was predatory. It was brilliant. It was capitalism at its most ruthlessly efficient and morally questionable. Her agent urged extreme caution. Terminating a valid contract would incinerate industry relationships, alienate insiders who valued loyalty, and paint Eala as someone willing to abandon commitments the moment something better appeared. The Philippine sports community particularly valued the cultural concept of utang na loob, debt of gratitude. Walking away from the brand that believed in her first, that took the risk when nobody else would be perceived as the worst kind of betrayal by millions of Filipinos who had supported her journey. But the numbers told a story that was impossible to ignore. This was generational wealth that would secure her family's future forever. This was global stardom on a scale no Filipino tennis player had ever achieved. This was the difference between being remembered as a good player and being immortalized as a legend. Nike gave her 72 hours to decide, knowing full well that the pressure would be unbearable. Those 3 days became the most psychologically agonizing period of Eala's entire life. She consulted family members who reminded her of their sacrifices. She spoke with mentors who offered conflicting advice. She prayed, she cried, she barely slept. Everyone had opinions, but nobody could make this impossible decision for her. Here's what Nike conveniently forgot to mention in their seductive pitch. Eala's original sponsor wasn't some nameless regional company operating out of a Manila warehouse. It was a subsidiary directly partnered with Adidas, one of Nike's fiercest global competitors. Suddenly, this wasn't just a contract dispute between a teenager and a small brand. This was Nike declaring total war on Adidas, using Eala as the weapon. And Adidas absolutely doesn't lose quietly or gracefully. Within 48 hours of Nike's announcement, Adidas filed devastating breach of contract litigation seeking $12 million in damages. Their legal argument was airtight and terrifying. Eala had signed a binding agreement with specific performance clauses that she had triggered by reaching certain WTA rankings. Those clauses automatically extended her contract, creating obligations Nike's lawyers had either catastrophically missed or arrogantly gambled they could overwhelm with sheer financial power. They gambled wrong. Adidas unleashed a public relations blitzkrieg that painted Eala as a traitor and Nike as a corporate bully destroying the fabric of professional sports. They released internal emails showing how they had supported Eala during injury recoveries, personally funded her travel to obscure tournaments that offered no prize money, and provided emotional support through difficult losses. They showcased photos of Adidas executives celebrating her junior Grand Slam victory as if she were family. The message was devastatingly clear. We built her from nothing. Nike bought her with blood money. The Philippine tennis community fractured instantly and violently. Half celebrated Eala's ambition, arguing she owed nobody loyalty except herself and her family. Professional sports was cutthroat by nature. Sentimentality paid absolutely no bills. She had earned this opportunity through raw talent and relentless work, not through charity that demanded eternal gratitude. Besides, Adidas would survive just fine. They sponsored hundreds of athletes globally. Losing one wouldn't collapse their empire. The other half felt personally wounded in ways that transcended sports. Eala had become a powerful symbol of Filipino resilience, of succeeding despite limited resources and systemic disadvantages. Her original sponsor represented that underdog struggle. They were the brand that took a genuine risk. By abandoning them for Nike's billions, critics argued she had betrayed the very narrative that made her special and relatable. She had become just another athlete mindlessly chasing money without principle or honor. Social media became an absolute war zone where nuance went to die. Hashtags like Team Eala and Adidas Faithful trended simultaneously as millions took sides. Fan accounts that once celebrated every aspect of her journey now posted emotional videos expressing profound betrayal. Some accused her of being manipulated by greedy agents who prioritized commissions over her reputation. Others fiercely defended her right to maximize earning potential during her brief athletic prime. Comment sections devolved into vicious arguments about loyalty, capitalism, colonialism, and whether athletes owed anything to the brands that initially believed in them. The locker room civil war that nobody anticipated began at Indian Wells. During what should have been a routine press conference, a journalist asked Aryna Sabalenka about the Eala-Nike controversy that had dominated sports media for weeks. Sabalenka, never one to dodge difficult questions or provide diplomatic non-answers, leaned directly into the microphone and delivered a response that detonated across every sports platform globally. Look, I understand business. We all do. But there's something called honor. You don't burn bridges with people who believed in you when absolutely nobody else did. That's not ambition. That's just being cold. She never mentioned Eala's name explicitly. She didn't need to. Context made the target obvious. Within hours, her comments had been clipped, analyzed from every conceivable angle, and weaponized by both sides. Eala's supporters accused Sabalenka of jealousy, suggesting established stars resented a rising competitor gaining Nike's coveted attention and resources. Defenders argued Sabalenka had simply articulated what millions felt but were too diplomatic or fearful to voice publicly. Then, Ons Jabeur entered the explosive situation during a Miami Open interview, taking the diametrically opposite stance with equal conviction. Athletes have incredibly short careers, maybe 10 years if we're extremely lucky and stay injury-free. We sacrifice our bodies, our youth, our personal lives, our mental health. If someone offers you genuinely life-changing money that will secure your family's future, you take it immediately. Period. Anyone saying otherwise is either already rich enough not to understand or lying to sound noble. Suddenly, the WTA had a profound philosophical divide that transcended the Eala situation entirely. This was about fundamental values that would define the tour's future: loyalty versus pragmatism, tradition versus capitalism, collective ethics versus individual survival. Was tennis a community or a marketplace? Coco Gauff, always thoughtful on social justice issues, posted a nuanced Instagram story that added another explosive dimension: I don't know Alex personally, so I can't judge her specific decision. But I do know that women athletes get absolutely crucified for the same business moves that men get praised for. If a male tennis player switched sponsors for a bigger deal, would we even be having this conversation? Or would we call him a smart businessman? She had identified the unspoken dynamic everyone had been carefully dancing around. Gendered expectations, male athletes renegotiated contracts constantly, aggressively leveraged competing offers, and ruthlessly maximized earnings without facing any moral scrutiny whatsoever. But when Eala did the exact same thing, she was called greedy, disloyal, and ungrateful. The double standard was glaring once someone finally named it. Yet, some prominent female players disagreed completely with Goff's framing. Elena Rybakina, speaking through a translator at a European tournament, offered a more traditional perspective. Money is important, yes, but reputation is everything in this sport. Once you show people you'll abandon commitments the moment something better arrives, why should anyone trust you again? Sponsors, coaches, teammates, they all remember. The internet remained undefeated in manufacturing chaos and conspiracy theories. Within 72 hours of Nike's announcement, Eala was trending in 14 countries simultaneously. Twitter became a battlefield where nuance was murdered on sight. Reddit threads spiraled into thousand-comment wars dissecting every microscopic angle. TikTok creators built entire accounts around hot takes, some supporting Eala's hustle, others condemning her alleged greed with theatrical disgust. Then the truly insane conspiracy theories emerged like monsters from the depths. One viral thread with millions of views claimed Adidas had intentionally sabotaged Eala's equipment during a crucial tournament 6 months after the Nike invitation, hoping to damage her ranking and reduce Nike's return on investment. Another suggested Nike had specifically targeted Eala not for her tennis ability, but to establish market dominance in Southeast Asia before Chinese brands could expand. A particularly wild theory claimed the entire controversy was manufactured drama designed to generate publicity that both Nike and Adidas secretly benefited from. 6 months after Nike's earth-shattering invitation, the dust still hasn't settled. It's just been redistributed into different corners where it continues causing problems nobody anticipated. The lawsuits eventually reached private settlements after months of brutal legal warfare. Terms remain strictly confidential under penalty of massive fines, but industry insiders suggest Nike paid Adidas a substantial 8-figure sum to make the litigation disappear quietly. Eala's original sponsor accepted an undisclosed buyout that sources claim was triple what they originally invested. Lawyers on all sides publicly claimed victory, while privately counting their enormous fees. Nobody won except the attorneys who billed millions. But the precedent had been established in ways that terrified smaller brands. Contracts in women's tennis were now negotiable through sheer financial aggression. If a brand wanted an athlete badly enough and had sufficient resources, traditional agreements could be demolished with enough capital. Legal obligations that once seemed ironclad were suddenly just suggestions backed by price tags. This revelation terrified regional sponsors who had historically nurtured young talent. They now faced an impossible calculation. Invest early in promising juniors, risking that mega corporations would simply poach them the moment they became valuable, or wait until athletes proved themselves, by which point bidding wars would price out everyone except Nike, Adidas, and maybe 3 other giants. The result was tragically predictable. Sponsorship opportunities for emerging players began evaporating. Why take a significant financial risk on an unproven 16-year-old if Nike could obliterate your contract the moment she succeeded? The very pipeline that had allowed athletes like Eala to develop was being strangled by the controversy her situation created. The ecosystem was eating itself. Meanwhile, Eala herself faced a profound identity crisis that no amount of money could resolve. She won her first WTA title 4 months after the Nike signing, a significant career milestone that should have been pure joy. But the celebration felt hollow and incomplete. Half the tennis world refused to acknowledge it. Social media comments on her victory post were vicious. Some fans had permanently turned against her, viewing every success as validation of choices they considered morally bankrupt. She had achieved her dream, but lost something essential in the process. This wasn't just about one athlete and one sponsorship deal anymore. This was about power in its rawest form. Who has it? Who wants it? And what gets destroyed in the ruthless pursuit of it? Nike didn't just offer Eala a contract, they offered her an impossible choice between survival and principles, between family security and public approval, between pragmatism and sentiment. And when she made the only rational decision available given her circumstances, the world punished her mercilessly for it. Maybe the real villain isn't Alex Eala at all. Maybe it's a system that forces teenagers to make impossible choices with consequences they can't fully comprehend, then judges them harshly for choosing survival over symbolic loyalty. Maybe it's fans who demand athletes remain humble and relatable while simultaneously expecting them to compete at the highest levels without adequate financial support. Maybe it's a sports industry that has always been built on exploitation, but pretends to value tradition and honor when it's convenient. The Nike invitation didn't just stun the WTA, it exposed every uncomfortable truth about women's tennis that everyone had been politely ignoring. The power imbalances, the gendered expectations, the way young athletes from developing nations are simultaneously celebrated as inspirational and exploited as commodities. The fact that loyalty is demanded from athletes, but never guaranteed in return by brands that will drop them the moment their value declines. Alex Eala's story isn't over. She's still competing, still winning, still representing the Philippines on the global stage. But she's forever changed, marked by a controversy that had nothing to do with her tennis ability and everything to do with forces far beyond any 19-year-old's control. The brands war that Nike triggered continues rumbling beneath the surface, reshaping sponsorship dynamics in ways we're only beginning to understand. So what do you think? Was Alex Eala a calculating opportunist who betrayed those who believed in her first? Or was she a young woman making a rational business decision in an industry that would have exploited her regardless? Is Nike a villain for using financial power to destroy contracts, or just a company playing by capitalism's established rules? Should athletes prioritize loyalty to brands that took early risks, or ruthlessly maximize their earning potential during brutally short careers? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because this conversation is far from over. If you found this deep dive into the biggest sponsorship scandal in women's tennis history valuable, smash that like button. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss when we expose the next controversy that rocks the sports world. Share this with anyone who still believes professional sports is about anything other than money and power. And remember, in the game of global brands and billion-dollar athletes, there are no heroes, only survivors.